Warm greetings to all our dear viewers and listeners of the Amazing Stories channel. Ladies and gentlemen, in today's familiar broadcast slot, I would like to invite you to join me in listening to a short story. Let's dive into the story together to discover its detailed developments, the specific ending, and the theme it conveys. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to this narration. Don't forget to leave a like, share, and comment with your thoughts to give me even more motivation to bring you better stories in the future. Thank you very much. This story was written on a peaceful late morning, with soft sunlight filtering through the trees and casting shimmering reflections on the serene lake surface. Sophia, a preschool teacher, was busy preparing breakfast in her small family apartment. She was a 27-year-old woman with a slim figure, a gentle face, and a balanced physique. Sophia was beautiful and youthful. In her younger days, she had many admirers, but her family's poverty forced her to focus on making ends meet. Her husband, James, had just stepped out of the bedroom. He was a simple man, with his skin weathered from years of working. Outdoors, James worked at a construction company, where he dealt daily with massive concrete blocks and dusty winds. He was not a romantic man, but was hardworking and deeply devoted to his family. James's family was an ordinary one. When James met Sophia, she admired his diligence and dedication. Among her friends' husbands, James considered himself the luckiest to have married the most beautiful woman. Because of this, he cherished Sophia even more and always gave her the best he could. However, James often felt insecure because he wasn't wealthy and couldn't provide Sophia with the happiness he believed she deserved. This drove him to work tirelessly, day and night, regardless of rain or shine. "I'm off to work," James said hurriedly. "I might be home late for lunch today. You eat first, okay?" Sophia gently replied as she continued her kitchen tasks. "All right. Take care." James stepped forward and planted a light kiss on her forehead, an action so familiar it had become routine. Sophia smiled faintly, but deep down, she felt a twinge of emptiness. His hurried demeanor made her feel as if this gesture was more habit than genuine affection. After James left, the house returned to its usual quiet. Sophia glanced around the modest kitchen, sparsely furnished with simple items. She had a 2-year-old daughter who also attended a nearby preschool. Suddenly, a vague sense of monotony crept into her thoughts. After dropping her daughter off at school, Sophia went to a cafe for a scheduled meeting with Mr. Victor, a parent of one of her students. Mr. Victor was a man in his 40s, tall and broad-shouldered. He was impeccably dressed in an expensive suit and shiny shoes that exuded success and power, making him effortlessly captivating. Seeing Sophia arrive, Mr. Victor waved with a friendly tone. "Sophia, over here. Sit with me. The coffee here is excellent. You should try it." Sophia approached the table with polite composure. "Thank you. I haven't had anything to eat this morning yet," she replied. Mr. Victor looked at her with a warm, slightly flirtatious gaze that made Sophia feel a faint flutter in her heart. It had been a long time since she had received such attention. Mr. Victor continued, his tone probing. "How have you been lately? You seem a bit tired." Sophia smiled lightly, trying to mask her unease. "It's nothing much. Just work and taking care of the child." Mr. Victor shifted to a more understanding tone. "I get it. Being a teacher like you is tough. But you've still managed to keep your charm, just like before." Sophia blushed, not out of shyness, but from a sense of unfamiliarity. It had been so long since anyone had complimented her like that. She glanced out the window, deliberately searching for a different topic to change the atmosphere. One afternoon, after her teaching duties ended, Sophia stepped out of her classroom, and her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, and Mr. Victor's name was displayed clearly. Feeling hesitant, Sophia nervously answered, her voice soft but tinged with tension. "Hello, Mr. Victor. I'm listening." Mr. Victor's voice came through the phone, warm and friendly. "Sophia, are you done with work? I have something to discuss with you about the kids. Could we meet for a moment?" Sophia's heart suddenly raced. She hesitated briefly, then smiled lightly and responded. "Where would you like to meet, sir?" Mr. Victor replied enthusiastically, "The same cafe as last time." "I'll head there now. Can you join me? When Sophia stepped into the cafe, Mr. Victor was already seated at the table. A carefully wrapped gift box in front of him. He stood up, smiling, and pulled out a chair for her. Sophia sat down across from him, maintaining a calm exterior even though she felt slightly unsettled inside. Mr. Victor smiled warmly and said sincerely, "For Vietnam Teacher's Day, I wanted to give my child's teacher a small gift as a token of gratitude. Please accept it to make me happy." Sophia looked at the gift box and then at Mr. Victor. In his eyes, she sensed genuine sincerity, but also something deeper, harder to grasp. Slowly, she opened the box to reveal a set of high-end cosmetics, the kind she had never dared to imagine owning because of their value. Holding the luxurious set, Sophia felt a quiet sense of pride creeping into her heart. Blushing slightly, she said shyly, "This is really too much. I don't know what to say except thank you." Mr. Victor looked directly into her eyes, his voice warm. "It's just a gesture from me. You deserve this attention. I also want you to know that there are people who see and appreciate your dedication." Sophia nodded, but her thoughts remained clouded. She understood that Mr. Victor's concern extended beyond the classroom. His sincerity, though pleasant, also brought her a sense of confusion. For a moment, she wondered if she was crossing a line, but quickly dismissed the thought. She convinced herself that everything was still within safe bounds, and that Mr. Victor was simply a kind and considerate parent. When Sophia returned home, she carried the cosmetics set into her bedroom and stood in front of the mirror, gazing at her reflection. A sense of pride and subtle vanity arose within her. She saw herself as beautiful, capable, and someone who was valued by others. But her thoughts quickly returned to James. Today was November 20th, a significant day for her, yet James hadn't even said a single word of congratulations. Sophia sighed quietly. She wasn't trying to compare, but her husband's indifference saddened her. The man she had lived with for so many years seemed oblivious to her simple expectations. His lack of attention created a void in her heart, making her vulnerable to emotions she knew she shouldn't feel. That evening, after dinner, James noticed something was off about his wife. He approached her, trying to start a conversation to ease the tension. Hesitantly, he asked, "What's wrong? Are you upset about something?" Sophia set down her chopsticks, her voice tinged with frustration. "Today is November 20th, and you didn't say a word to me." James looked surprised, then forced a smile in an attempt to lighten the mood. "Oh, come on, we've been married for years. Do we really need to act like strangers and exchange formalities?" Hearing this, Sophia felt even more disappointed. She didn't say another word and quietly began clearing the table. Realizing his mistake, James followed her and tried to make amends. He spoke as gently as he could. "I know I can be a bit careless. Don't be mad, okay? I'll make it up to you tonight." James pulled her into the bedroom, hugged her from behind, and began whispering sweet nothings. Sophia didn't resist, but in her heart, she felt only emptiness. Despite James's efforts to express affection, his clumsy attempts only deepened her dissatisfaction. Their intimacy that night was silent, but Sophia knew her heart was growing further apart from her husband than ever before. This year, Sophia's class was graduating, and the parents had agreed to organize a farewell party and an outdoor activity. In blue Little Havana, Sophia was excited and silently grateful to the parents for their support throughout the 3 years. On a weekend morning, Sophia joined a group of parents, including Mr. Victor, who volunteered to scout the blue Little Havana for the event. Among the group, Mr. Victor was the most enthusiastic, always suggesting creative ideas. His energy left a strong impression on Sophia, especially because he had a way of making her feel comfortable and cared for. The trip began early in the morning. The Blue Little Havana was located on the city outskirts, about a 2-hour drive from the center. The scouting group included Sophia, Mr. Victor, and 2 other parents. When they arrived, the park owner guided them on a tour of the various areas: spacious playgrounds, lush ecological gardens, and a well-equipped homestay section. The homestay area was secluded, nestled in a peaceful valley far from the city's hustle and bustle. After completing the survey, the group was invited to enjoy lunch at the Blue Little Havana's restaurant. When everyone else had left for the city, Mr. Victor and Sophia stayed behind to finalize the contract with the blue little Havana. The weather suddenly turned gloomy as dark clouds gathered overhead and heavy rain began to pour. Just as the other parent's car crossed a bridge, water from upstream surged, submerging the crossing and forcing Mr. Victor and Sophia to stay back. The heavy rain made it impossible to continue the journey, so Mr. Victor decided to turn back to the blue little Havana and wait for the storm to pass. The blue little Havana owner arranged for them to stay in a smaller homestay with large windows overlooking a quiet valley. Outside, the relentless rain mixed with the sound of wind howling through the trees, creating a somber and eerie mountain atmosphere. Inside the cozy room, the lights had to be turned on as the storm darkened the sky. The proximity between Sophia and Mr. Victor became more noticeable than ever. The warm, soft light created an intimate ambience that left Sophia feeling uneasy. Mr. Victor glanced at Sophia with concern in his eyes. "Sophia, are you cold? Let me adjust the heater for you." Sophia nodded, her heart racing as Mr. Victor moved closer. His concern now felt less like that of a parent to a teacher and more like a man trying to win over a woman. She felt herself being drawn into a whirlwind of emotions she couldn't escape. Sophia shook her head slightly, her voice trembling. "No need, I'm fine." Mr. Victor seized the moment. "Since it's still raining, let's go over the plans for the year-end party." "Yes, of course," Sophia replied. The two leaned closer to discuss the details while the rain continued to beat down outside. Mr. Victor spoke again. "I know year-end activities are hard on teachers, so leave this to me. I don't want to see you stressed." His words, full of intent, made Sophia pause, but Mr. Victor pressed on. He sat closer to her and gently placed his hand over hers. The unexpected closeness shattered the boundaries Sophia had carefully drawn. Her heart pounded erratically, and her rationality seemed defeated by the irresistible charm of the man before her. In a low, warm voice, Mr. Victor said, "Sophia, do you know? I've always felt you're special. You're an amazing woman, and I can't stop thinking about you. I know this isn't right, but I can't control my feelings." Sophia felt her head spin. His words were like a hypnotic spell, making her forget everything else around her. All that remained was the yearning to be loved and cared for. Mr. Victor moved closer to her, slowly and deliberately, without haste. When he placed a hand on her shoulder, Sophia couldn't stop herself from trembling slightly. A wave of both familiarity and novelty overwhelmed her. Mr. Victor leaned in and whispered in her ear, his voice deep and magnetic, "You're so beautiful. It's been a long time since I felt my heart race like this." Sophia looked up at him, her gaze drawn into his deep, captivating eyes. His maturity and elegance made her feel like a young girl rediscovering emotions she thought she had lost in her dull marriage. With a shy but trembling voice, she replied, "Mr. Victor, Before she could finish, Mr. Victor gently lifted her chin, bringing their faces closer together. Their lips nearly touched as he looked into her eyes, as if trying to read her every thought. The silence between them was heavy with emotion, drawing them into a world of their own. In a tender yet resolute tone, Mr. Victor said, "Let me take care of you. You deserve to be loved and cherished." His words melted into Sophia's soul like honey, leaving her unable to resist the pull of his presence. She felt her weakness gradually swept away by his strength and determination. Her heart could no longer resist. Slowly, she closed her eyes as Mr. Victor leaned in, his lips brushing against hers, soft yet full of passion. The first touch was tentative, as if they were exploring each other, but the kiss quickly grew more intense, like a rising tide sweeping away all their worries and the barriers they had once set. Mr. Victor held Sophia tightly, his hands skillfully gliding over her back. Each gesture felt like a promise of affection and devotion. Sophia whispered through her rapid breaths, "Mr. Victor, I don't know if this is right, but I can't stop myself." Still tender in his tone, he replied, "Right or wrong doesn't matter, Sophia. What matters is that you're here with me, and I promise you'll never regret this." Sophia felt herself completely swept away. She responded to his care, allowing herself to melt into his embrace, feeling the warmth and protection he offered. That afternoon, in the small room under the sound of falling rain, they truly connected, not just physically, but as two souls seeking solace and love they had long been deprived of. She could sense his skill and experience in every touch, every caress. For the first time in years, Sophia felt alive, cherished, and rediscovered the emotions she thought she had long forgotten. When the rain finally passed, the gentle sunlight filtered through the curtains. Sophia awoke, her mind hazy and her heart heavy. The golden sunlight outside, calm and serene, stood in stark contrast to the storm of emotions raging within her. Sophia lay still, listening to Mr. Victor's steady breathing beside her. The events of the afternoon came rushing back, leaving her with an indescribable lump in her throat. He was still sound asleep, his face serene, as if everything that had happened was perfectly natural. Carefully, Sophia moved, trying not to wake him. She needed time to think, to reflect on what had just happened. Stepping out of bed, she stood in front of the large mirror in the bathroom, staring into her own eyes now filled with conflict and self-questioning. She couldn't believe she had been so weak, falling into Mr. Victor's embrace. Everything seemed to have spiraled out of control. She whispered to herself, "What have you done, Sophia? You've betrayed James, betrayed your family." Those self-reproaching words echoed in her mind, making it impossible to stop thinking. She felt a deep pain, not just from the betrayal itself, but from the realization that once she crossed this line, there would be no turning back. When she returned to the room, Mr. Victor was already awake. He sat on the bed, smiling warmly at her. But this time, his smile didn't bring her comfort. Instead, it only made her feel more burdened. In his usual gentle tone, he said, "Sophia, you're truly incredible." Sophia forced a faint smile, trying to mask the turmoil inside. "Thank you. But Mr. Victor, we can't continue like this. This is wrong, and I don't want," he interrupted her, his voice still calm and persuasive. "Sophia, I understand how you feel. But sometimes, we need to live true to our emotions. I don't regret what happened last night, and I don't think you should blame yourself either." Sophia shook her head, the guilt becoming more intense. She knew his words only added to her confusion. Part of her longed to be loved, to feel special, but she couldn't keep lying to herself and her family. Her voice trembled as she said, "Mr. Victor, I can't. I have a husband and a child. I can't lose my family over a moment of weakness." This time his patience remained, but his eyes turned more serious. "Sophia, I don't want to pressure you, but think carefully. Are you truly happy with your life right now? I can give you everything you need, everything you deserve." Sophia fell silent, her mind spinning with conflicting thoughts. She knew this was the moment she had to make a decision, one that would completely change her life. Mr. Victor gazed at her, his eyes searching for answers. He stood up and moved closer, placing a gentle kiss on her forehead. Softly, he whispered, "I know you're worried, but remember, I'll always be here for you if you need me." Sophia nodded slightly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. She didn't say another word, turning quietly and walking out of the room. She left behind everything that had happened, and a part of her heart as well. On her way back home, Sophia felt as though she was crossing into a new threshold, where she would have to confront reality and face the consequences of her actions. As time passed, her relationship with Mr. Victor grew deeper and more clandestine. He continuously showered her with lavish gifts and short getaways, making her feel as though she were living in an entirely different world, a world full of passion and temptation. She couldn't resist his charming invitations and the confidence of a man who clearly understood women's hearts. Sophia found herself sinking further into the relationship. Hotel rendezvous became a regular occurrence, and each meeting felt like an escape from reality, a chance to step into a world where she was the center of attention and affection. Yet beneath the passion, she couldn't deny the growing guilt that weighed on her heart. One Sunday morning, Sophia received a call from Mr. Victor. He suggested taking her on a getaway to a newly opened homestay in the outskirts of Hanoi. She hesitated but couldn't resist the allure of his charm and the enticing promise of the trip. The homestay was nestled in a peaceful countryside, completely removed from the bustling life of the city. This only added to the sense of enchantment Sophia felt, as if she were being transported into a dreamlike world. When they arrived, they were warmly welcomed, and Mr. Victor led her to a luxurious suite where everything seemed perfectly prepared for an idyllic retreat. Sophia couldn't hide her excitement as she took in the grandeur and the meticulous care evident in every detail. With a sparkling smile, she said, "Mr. Victor, I've never experienced anything as amazing as this." His voice warm and filled with affection, he replied, "You deserve the best, Sophia. I'll always be here to give you everything wonderful in life." In the romantic setting of the suite, they quickly fell into each other's arms. Sophia couldn't suppress the desire and longing that overwhelmed her, surrendering to his tender yet commanding gestures. She felt like a young woman again, reliving the sweetness and passion she had lost in her dull marriage. Meanwhile, back at home, her daughter, Bella, developed a high fever and began crying incessantly. Sophia's mother, Mrs. Margaret, grew increasingly worried and tried calling her daughter, but Sophia's phone was turned off. With no other choice, Mrs. Margaret called her son-in-law, James. "James, are you busy? Bella has a high fever and won't stop crying," she said, her voice filled with concern. Hearing this, James rushed home from the construction site, still wearing his dusty, sweat-soaked work clothes. Without even changing, he picked up his daughter and, together with Mrs. Margaret, took her to the hospital. During the ride, Bella continued crying for her mother, heightening their worry. Mrs. Margaret's voice trembled as she muttered, "Sophia, where are you? Your daughter's so sick, and she's asking for you. Come home quickly." James started sensing something wasn't right, but remained silent, focusing on soothing his daughter. The tall, rough-handed man struggled with childcare, but his eyes revealed deep love and devotion for his child. At that moment, in the luxurious homestay, Sophia and Mr. Victor were lost in their passionate embrace, no longer worrying about judgmental glances or gossip. Mr. Victor's daughter had already graduated, and Sophia no longer feared the gossip surrounding her. She had convinced herself that Mr. Victor's feelings for her were genuine, and she began imagining a new life they could build together. Using his eloquence, Mr. Victor frequently shared stories of his unhappy marriage, recounting how his wife was unfaithful and neglected their children. He told Sophia that she had brought him a sense of family he hadn't felt in years. His words comforted Sophia and made her feel understood. She began contemplating leaving her husband to be with him. Hesitant but resolute, she said, "Mr. Victor, I've thought about this a lot. I'm going to leave my husband. Will you leave your wife so we can be together? I believe we can be happy." For a moment, Mr. Victor appeared surprised. His eyes revealed hesitation as he stood, walked to the window, and gazed out, seemingly lost in thought. His voice lowered, heavy with contemplation. "Sophia, I understand what you're thinking, but you have to understand, my life isn't simple. I have a wife, children, and a career. Everything in my life is intertwined. Giving it all up to be with you, I'm not sure that's the right decision." His words hit Sophia like a crushing blow to her heart. She froze, suddenly realizing the harsh truth. Mr. Victor wasn't prepared to sacrifice everything to be with her. What she had mistaken for true love was nothing more than fleeting infatuation. Feeling hollow, Sophia sensed the gravity of her mistake. This was not the love she had envisioned, but a temporary escape fueled by momentary desire. As if sensing her turmoil, Mr. Victor walked back to her. Placing a gentle kiss on her forehead, he whispered, "I know you're worried, but just remember, I'll always be here for you if you need me." Sophia nodded faintly, her eyes clouded with tears, threatening to spill. She didn't say another word, quietly turning away and leaving the room. Behind her, she left not only the events of that day, but also a part of her heart. Sophia's voice trembled as she tried to hide her pain. "So, all of this was just a fleeting pleasure? I truly believed you loved me. Mr. Victor turned to look at Sophia, his eyes filled with sadness, though he couldn't deny the truth. Sophia, I do care about you deeply, but life isn't as simple as we'd like it to be. I can't abandon my family, and I don't think you should abandon yours either. Let's treasure what we had. It felt as if Sophia was being woken up from a beautiful dream, only to face a harsh reality. Emptiness and guilt overwhelmed her. She realized she had delved too deeply into this relationship and now had to confront the inevitable consequences. Meanwhile, at the hospital, James sat on a bench, waiting for the results of his daughter's medical examination. His phone buzzed, and a message popped up on Zalo. It was from a friend who had sent a photo taken at the opening of a new homestay that morning. In the photo, there was Sophia, standing with another man in front of a luxurious resort suite. James stared at the image, his heart tightening. He let out a deep sigh and clutched the invitation card for the opening, a card addressed to both him and Sophia, which was now crumpled in his hand. He remembered that morning when he had suggested they attend together, but Sophia had declined, claiming she was busy preparing materials for her students for the end of the school year. Trusting her, he had accepted her excuse and skipped the event himself, preoccupied with work at another construction site. Now, however, the truth was staring him in the face. His thoughtful gaze drifted into the distance, the image of Sophia with the stranger replaying in his mind. Every small detail of their marriage began to surface, painting a clearer picture of their life together. He couldn't fathom how the woman he had built a home and shared his life with could now be in such an unimaginable situation. In the hospital room, Bella lay in bed, asleep after receiving medication for her fever. Her tiny face was still flushed red. Sophia's mother, Mrs. Margaret, sat beside the bed, her eyes filled with worry as she glanced toward the door, waiting for something or someone. But Sophia hadn't appeared. There was no word from her. Mrs. Margaret sighed deeply, her voice tinged with anxiety. James, do you know where Bella's mother is? She's not usually like this. Why has her phone been off all day? James shook his head, his exhaustion and worry evident in his eyes. I don't know, Mom. She said she was going to the school to prepare materials for her students, but I can't understand why I can't reach her. Mrs. Margaret looked at her son-in-law, feeling the weight of his fatigue and worry, but she didn't know what to say. A bad feeling began to creep into her thoughts, though she didn't dare imagine the worst. At the same time, in the luxurious homestay, Sophia sat by the window, gazing out at the lush green garden. Everything seemed to have changed in an instant. She realized that her relationship with Mr. Victor was nothing more than a sweet deception. Her heart felt heavy as a sense of emptiness and guilt washed over her. She had given up too much, only to discover that it was all an illusion. Quietly, she whispered to herself, her voice filled with reproach. What have I done? I've lost myself for a fleeting moment of happiness. Mr. Victor sat silently in the corner of the room, watching her. He knew that in this moment, words were unnecessary. Anything he said would only deepen the pain they both felt. Sophia had gone too far, and now she had to face the harsh truth of it all. Mr. Victor's voice grew quieter, as though trying to cling to a sliver of hope. Sophia, I don't want you to feel guilty. I know we've crossed the line, but I don't want to lose you. No matter what, I'd like us to stay in touch, and I still want to take care of you if you ever need me. Sophia looked at him, her eyes reflecting exhaustion and sadness. She knew he was trying to salvage a relationship that had no future, and she also knew she could no longer continue this mistake. Her voice was firm, though tinged with pain. Mr. Victor, I know you care about me, but I can't keep doing this. I need to go back to my life, to my family. I can't let everything fall apart just because of a moment of weakness. Mr. Victor said nothing more, simply nodding silently. He understood that he couldn't force Sophia to stay, nor did he want to. Though the feelings of regret and loss were overwhelming, he knew it was time to let go. Sophia stood up and began packing her belongings in silence. She knew this might be the last time she would see him in such a setting. All she wanted now was to return to her family and try to repair the damage she had caused. On the way back, Sophia's phone rang. It was a call from James. Her heart raced as she saw her husband's name on the screen. She hesitated for a moment before pressing the answer button. James's voice was filled with concern, though it couldn't hide his exhaustion. Sophia, where are you? Bella has a high fever. Mom's been calling you, but she couldn't reach you. His words struck Sophia like a blow to her chest. Her heart tightened as a wave of guilt washed over her. She had forgotten her family, forgotten that she was still a mother, a wife. What she had done not only hurt herself, but also threatened to destroy the people she loved most. Her voice trembled, and her eyes welled with tears. James, I'm so sorry. I'm coming back right now. James didn't respond immediately. He let out a deep sigh, and in his silence, Sophia could feel his weariness. A mix of worry for his daughter and pain for the state of their family churned within him. Sophia immediately asked Mr. Victor to drive her back home. During the entire journey, she couldn't stop blaming herself, replaying everything she had done in her mind. When she arrived at the hospital, her emotions were a chaotic blend of guilt and regret. It was hard to summon the courage to face her husband and her mother. As she entered the hospital room, she saw her mother sitting by Bella's bedside. Her daughter was still asleep, her tiny face flushed from the fever. James stood silently in a corner of the room, his gaze distant, as if lost in deep thought. Mrs. Margaret noticed the tension in the air and the somber expression on her son-in-law's face. She sensed something was wrong, though she didn't want to make the situation worse. She knew her daughter was hiding something, but at this moment, what mattered most was keeping the peace so they could focus on caring for Bella. In a gentle but tactful tone, she said, "You two stay here with her tonight. I'll come back early tomorrow morning so James can rest and get to work. Whatever needs to be discussed, we'll talk about it later." James nodded slightly, saying nothing. He felt the weight of Mrs. Margaret's concern and became even more certain that something was amiss. However, he didn't want to cause a scene, especially while their daughter needed care and attention. He glanced at Sophia, but didn't speak. She avoided his gaze, the guilt inside her growing heavier by the second. That night, when everything had quieted down, James sat by the hospital bed, watching his daughter sleep. The photo his friend had sent earlier continued to haunt him. It was the clearest evidence of what he had long suspected. Yet it was also something he didn't want to believe. After some thought, James decided to set the photo aside. He wasn't ready to confront the truth, not while their daughter was seriously ill. His heart weighed down with conflict and pain. James eventually fell asleep on the long bench in the hospital room. The next morning, as promised, Mrs. Margaret arrived at the hospital early, allowing James to go home to freshen up and prepare for work. By then, Sophia was already awake, her face still showing signs of exhaustion and tension. She had requested 2 days off work to clear her mind and care for her daughter. When James left, Mrs. Margaret quietly sat down next to Sophia. Her eyes were filled with concern, but also carried an indescribable unease. She knew this was the time to speak with her daughter, to help her see the reality of her situation before it was too late. Her voice was gentle yet firm. "Where were you yesterday, Sophia?" Sophia hesitated, avoiding her mother's gaze. She knew she couldn't hide the truth forever, but she didn't know where to start. Her voice was weak, full of hesitation. Mrs. Margaret's eyes softened, but her tone remained resolute. "Don't tell me you were at the school. That excuse might work on your husband, but not on me. I was a teacher too, Sophia. I understand. Whatever it is, you need to tell me. Don't let something that isn't worth it ruin your family." Her mother's words pierced straight into Sophia's heart like a dagger. She no longer had the strength to hide. Tears streamed down her face as she sat there, feeling small and pitiful. She began to recount everything to her mother. The mistakes she had made, the illusions she had chased, and the way she had sunk so deeply into them. Mrs. Margaret listened silently, not interrupting, though her eyes betrayed a mix of disappointment and sorrow. When Sophia finished, her mother let out a long sigh, her face etched with sadness. Her voice was calm, but carried a heavy weight. "Life isn't a romantic novel, my daughter. You can't demand so much from it. Your husband loves you and wants to spend his life with you. That other man? He loves you because he only wants to walk a short path with you. Sophia sat quietly, her mother's words crashing over her like waves, each one exposing her mistakes. Her mother continued, her tone steady and measured. Your husband doesn't pour all his time and energy into you because he's saving it for the family, for the life you've built together. The other man might love you as if it's life or death, but that's because he only wants you for a short while. He can love you passionately, sleep with you a few nights, and then leave you behind. Your husband takes care of your life, while the other man only takes care of your emotions. You won't find a man who fulfills his responsibilities as a husband and father while also acting like a passionate lover. Don't make things harder for yourself. Leaving a marriage is easy, but returning to it is incredibly hard. Be cautious with your steps. As Sophia listened to her mother, she felt her throat dry, unable to cry or speak. She thought to herself, if only she had hit me a few times, maybe it wouldn't hurt so much. But the more her mother spoke, the more clearly Sophia saw her own failures. She hated herself, despised the woman she had become. Her mother sighed again, her voice contemplative. Getting lost isn't the worst thing, my child. The worst thing is not knowing where you want to go. Those final words rang in Sophia's mind like a warning bell, making her realize just how far off course she had wandered. She knew she had to find the right path again before it was too late. In the days following her daughter's discharge from the hospital, Sophia felt like someone waking from a nightmare. Her mother's advice echoed in her heart, every word etched deeply into her mind. Slowly, she began to reevaluate her life. For the first time in a long while, she truly observed her husband. James wasn't a romantic man. This she had known since they married. He rarely gave gifts or spoke sweet words. But she now saw that, in his quiet way, James had always put their family first. He spent the majority of his time working tirelessly to provide for her and their child, never complaining or asking for anything in return. Every day, James would wake up early to prepare breakfast for the family before heading to work. No matter how busy he was, he always made an effort to come home on time to have dinner with his family. Sophia recalled moments when James took care of their daughter, Bella, when she was sick. She remembered his sweat-soaked face as he patiently wrung warm towels to soothe their child's fever. His eyes reflected worry, yet he never once complained. James didn't speak much, but his actions always spoke volumes about the love and dedication he had for his family. Sophia realized that while he might not be the romantic partner she once dreamed of, he was the kind of man any woman would wish for, sincere, devoted, and always prioritizing his family. These realizations filled her with immense regret. She had lost her way, tempted by fleeting sweet illusions, forgetting that true happiness was right in front of her all along. As each day passed, Sophia began to see James's worth more clearly. She resolved to correct her mistakes. One morning, while tidying the bookshelf in their bedroom, Sophia accidentally discovered a small notebook hidden behind some old books. Curious, she picked it up and opened it. It was James's journal, with neat, careful handwriting. Sophia had never known her husband kept a diary, and her curiosity urged her to read further. The first pages detailed his thoughts and feelings about work and family. But as she turned to the following pages, she was drawn into James's deepest, most painful confessions. He wrote about the heartbreak of realizing his wife was having an affair and that her love for him was no longer the same. Sophia, I know you've changed. I can see the distance in your eyes and feel it in the way you treat me. But I don't know what else to do except stay silent. I don't want to lose you. I don't want our daughter to grow up in a broken family. Holding the journal, Sophia's hands trembled. Each word felt like a dagger stabbing into her heart, leaving her in indescribable pain. She couldn't believe that James had known the truth all along, yet chose to endure it in silence. He bore everything to protect her dignity and the family's harmony. James continued, I know you're unhappy and I blame myself for not giving you what you wanted. But I love you, Sophia. I only want you to be happy, even if it means sacrificing my own happiness. I will never let anyone hurt you, even if that person is you. These heartfelt words brought tears streaming down Sophia's face. She realized how extraordinary her husband was, And yet she had lost herself in superficial desires, forgetting the true value of happiness. James wasn't just a good husband and father. He was someone who silently shielded her from consequences she wasn't even aware of. I saw the photo of you and that man at the homestay today. Do you know how much that hurt me? But I chose to remain silent. I don't want anyone to hurt you. I don't want you to feel ashamed in front of your colleagues or our child. To me, you will always be a good mother, a good wife, and a respectable teacher. I believe you will come back. Sophia sat down, clutching the journal as tears streamed down her face. She felt ashamed, small, and deeply guilty. She had shattered the trust James had in her, and that hurt her more than anything else. But through his diary, Sophia also realized she still had a chance to make things right, to return to her family, and to reclaim the happiness she had almost lost. She hugged the journal tightly, as if trying to hold on to the most precious thing in her life. She knew she had to change, to do whatever it took to regain the trust and love James had always given her. Determined, Sophia promised herself she would never let this happiness slip away again. After finishing the journal, it felt as though she had awakened from a deep slumber. She finally realized how fortunate she was to have a husband like James, dedicated, loving, and willing to sacrifice everything for their family. The words in his diary not only brought her immense pain and regret, but also helped her understand the true value of family happiness, the very thing she had nearly lost. Determined to make amends, Sophia started by mending her relationship with James. She understood that trust, once broken, needed time to heal, but she was ready to put in every effort to make it right. Every morning, Sophia woke up earlier to prepare breakfast for the family. She spent more time with her daughter, Bella, taking care of her and playing with her to make up for the moments she had neglected her due to her fleeting illusions. Sophia also tried to create new memories with James. She suggested weekend outings to the park, organized cozy family dinners, and spent more time listening to James's stories about work and life. She quietly learned to pay attention to the little things she used to overlook. Simple gestures like preparing a nice meal, listening to him talk about work stress, or just sitting together in silence. Gradually, these moments began to rebuild the bond between them. Although James kept some emotional distance, he couldn't ignore the positive changes in Sophia. He started to feel a small glimmer of hope that their relationship could be repaired. Slowly, he began to respond to her efforts, opening up and working with her to rebuild the trust they had lost. In her most challenging moments, Sophia turned to her mother, Mrs. Margaret, a woman with deep life experience and wisdom. Sophia, her mother said gently, remember, family happiness doesn't come from fleeting emotions or momentary infatuations. It comes from patience, dedication, and loyalty. Love isn't always about grand gestures or romantic words. It's about enduring the mundane and staying steadfast. Sophia listened intently to her mother's words, feeling each one resonate deeply in her heart. Her mother continued, her voice soft yet persuasive. In marriage, there will be times when you feel tired, discouraged, even tempted to give up. But what matters most is knowing how to preserve and nurture love. Never let momentary temptations destroy the happiness you've worked so hard to build. Her mother's words felt like a reminder, strengthening Sophia's resolve. She understood that creating a happy family required constant effort, not just from her, but from both partners. One evening, after Bella had fallen asleep, Sophia sat next to James on the sofa. She held his hand, her tear-filled eyes reflecting her determination. With an emotional voice, she said, James, I was wrong. I know I've hurt you deeply, but I don't want to lose you. I don't want to lose our family. I'll do everything I can to make up for my mistakes and fix what I've broken. Please give me another chance. James looked at her, his eyes filled with tenderness. He held her hand tightly, as if afraid that letting go would mean losing her forever. In the quiet of the evening, James decided to share the thoughts he had kept buried for so long. His voice was deep, trembling with emotion. Sophia, I know I've been neglectful. I've made you feel lonely and unhappy. I've been so consumed with work and the pressures of life that I forgot you needed love and care too. I was wrong to leave you to shoulder all the burdens alone. I regret making you go through those feelings by yourself." Tears welled up in Sophia's eyes as she listened to him. She felt the sincerity in his words and the love he had hidden for so long. James continued, his voice filled with resolve. "I promise from now on, I'll change. I'll work to balance my job and our family. Yes, money is important, but if earning it means neglecting you and making you feel sad, then that's my failure as a husband. I won't let that happen again. You and our daughter are the most important things in my life." James's words felt like a healing balm for Sophia's wounded heart. She nodded, unable to hold back any longer, and burst into tears in his arms. Those tears were not just an emotional release, but also a sign of forgiveness, acceptance, and a renewed commitment to their future. James gently lifted her chin, his eyes glistening with emotion. He leaned in and kissed her, a kiss filled not only with tenderness but also with love, regret, and a promise for a brighter future. In that moment, all misunderstandings, anger, and missteps faded away, leaving only a rekindled love between them. They clung to each other, as though trying to make up for all the lost time, the days they had unknowingly drifted apart. In James's embrace, Sophia felt a sense of security and love she had been searching for. Together, they gave into their passion, as if silently vowing to always stay by each other's side, to love and cherish one another. Afterward, as they lay in each other's arms, they drifted into a deep and peaceful sleep, one untouched by the storms that had once shaken their lives. The next morning, Sophia awoke to sunlight streaming through the window, illuminating the room. She slowly opened her eyes, noticing the unusual quiet. There was no sound of Bella's usual playful chatter. Confused at first, she then remembered. It was Sunday. A small smile crossed her lips as her eyes caught sight of a note on the bedside table. Written in James's familiar scrawled handwriting, it read, "Mom, Bella was sleeping so soundly that we didn't have the heart to wake you. We got to visit Grandma and Grandpa. Come join us when you wake up." Sophia sat up, the sunlight warming her face as a feeling of lightness and happiness filled her heart. She realized that sometimes it takes walking through the darkness to truly appreciate the brilliance of the light. Happiness, she now understood, wasn't far away. It had been right there, where she had once overlooked it. Smiling to herself, she felt the warmth of love and peace she had found again. She quickly got out of bed, ready to head to her parents' house. Today, she would hold her daughter tightly, tell her husband how much she loved him, and start a new chapter in their family's story, a chapter filled with love, understanding, and trust. On her way to her parents' house, her heart was light as she embraced the quiet beauty of the weekend. The familiar route felt strangely different today. Up ahead, commotion had gathered, with a crowd blocking the road and loud, angry voices filling the air. Frowning, Sophia slowed her pace and approached carefully, trying to peer through the crowd. A woman's furious voice rang out, filled with anger and scorn. "Stop right there. Don't try to deny it anymore. Today, I'll show everyone who you really are." From her position, Sophia silently observed the scene. A shiny black car was parked in the middle of the road, its door wide open. A man inside was trying to cover his face, but phones all around him were snapping pictures relentlessly. Standing beside him was a middle-aged woman, pale but resolute, holding on to him as if to expose him to the world. "Isn't that the teacher? You know, the one having an affair with a parent?" A voice behind Sophia whispered. "Oh my, how disgraceful," someone else muttered. Sophia's chest tightened. She glanced over the crowd one last time, her gaze landing on the car and the man trying to hide his face. It was unmistakably Mr. Victor. A shiver ran down her spine, cold and chilling. Indeed, the night is long, but the truth always comes to light, she thought. Memories of her past mistakes with Mr. Victor flashed before her eyes. She recalled how she had once been so close to losing herself in that dangerous game of temptation. But she felt a deep sense of relief. Relief that she had stopped herself in time before things had spiraled out of control. If she hadn't made the decision to turn back, she might have been the one standing there, enduring the scornful stares and whispers of the crowd. What would have happened to her family? What would James have thought? And what about her daughter, her career? Everything could have been destroyed for a fleeting moment of weakness. She took a deep breath, feeling as though she had narrowly escaped a chasm. Turning away from the crowd, she walked away without looking back. The road ahead might still be long and filled with challenges, but Sophia knew that as long as she treasured what she had and kept her heart true, she could overcome anything. More importantly, she now understood that true love wasn't found in fleeting moments of passion, but in trust, forgiveness, and kindness between two people. Dear listeners, Sophia and James's story is a testament to the trials of marriage and a profound lesson on the value of love and happiness. Thank you for listening to this story until the end. We hope it resonated with you. Don't forget to like, share, and comment on the video to share your thoughts and join the discussion about this story. See you in the next one.